and welcome back to the second official episode of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, backing here with another episode, as I just said. And wow, what a speed weeks that was. Boy, we got a ton to cover in this episode. How about Flores Motorsports? How about Ross Jackson? What a story. What a redemption arc for Jackson. And what a revenge tour already for Jackson, spoiling his former team's dominant speed weeks. We'll talk all about that. We got to talk about the drama at Orkedi Bros Racing. Analytics or going with your heart? Should Schmidt have gone with Reynolds or should he gone with Orkedi? We're going to give an update on that situation as far as we know. We're going to talk about said analytics and how much of an effect it had on speed weeks. Were teams leaning too much into data? Did they need to lean more into it? We'll talk all about that. We definitely got to give Nick Painter a big shout out. And his dramatic photo finish over Marcus Edwards, the Craftsman season opener, was a banger. We also got to talk about big news in silly season. The first domino to drop, Ryan Dixon and CJ Barrymore Racing mutually agreeing to part ways. And then next week, we're heading to the ASCA's backyard, the streets of Computerville. So that's going to be really fun. The first right turns already of 2026 and the first real test of the new regulations. So without further ado, we're going to get right into it. But first, before we do, we got to shout out the sports premier partner, Circle B Diecast / Plan B Sales. Use coupon code ASCA for free shipping on any orders, $20 or more inside the U.S. if you want to. Buy a replica diecast. Hey, we got Ross Jackson, replica diecast on his Ajax 200 win. So yeah, go check out Circle B Diecast / Plan B Sales for that one. And also the ASCA merch shop. We still got the Speed Week sale going on. Like I said, it's going to be going on for pretty much the entire season. So basically through June 18th, you can get your favorite superstars gear for 30% off. So that's a really awesome promotion. Just use code season12 at checkout to take advantage of it. And the first link in bio to visit the official merch shop of the ASCA. So without further ado, let's get into it officially. And wow, Ross Jackson, what a story, what a guy, what a journey it's been for he and Flores Motorsports, the ultimate ASCA band of misfits. You've got Jackson, the former Craftsman Series champion, hailed as Jimmy Hood's heir apparent, the next big thing for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, the successor in the number 88. He was going to carry that number, his legacy into the next generation. And obviously, as we saw, things just never worked out. He finished a high of 14th in points, I believe, his rookie year, 17th in points in 2024, 16th in points last year. Never won a race with the team. And obviously, we all know about the big clash with Todd Kidd that nearly gassed Kidd's championship hopes if he didn't make that amazing comeback drive from 21st to 5th. So Jackson, obviously, he gets let go by Ronnie Woods Motorsports. They paid Chris Barrymore $14 million to bring him in to Jackson's old ride. They renumbered to the 5. And everyone's kind of focused on Barrymore. He's going to be the big star and obviously the focus. Well, Jackson, he was actually the last full-time driver to be confirmed in 2026 was him signing with Flores Motorsports. This didn't even happen until the off season, a couple days after the finale, this was confirmed. And then just a couple days after the finale as well, Sheldon Price, his crew chief, Jackson's crew chief, that is, was fired from Orkedi Bros Racing. So you've got that dichotomy of two guys kind of outcast, let go from the two ASCA powerhouses, and they join forces here at Flores Motorsports, the team that finished 22nd in points, last year with Tommy Woods. He retires in the off season, so that opens up the seat for Jackson. And as I say, the rest now has already become history. But it's a huge victory for. We'll start with Jackson, because I talked about the forgotten youth movement last week, and it's hard to remember. Ross Jackson's also 25 years old, same age as Park, same age as Bennett. Only a year older than Ward, 2 years older than Schmidt, and we completely kind of forget about him because everyone did assume he was damaged goods, that he just wasn't going to be the driver that we thought he was going to be. We thought there was going to be anyone in that 2023 rookie class that would become a superstar right now, especially after the way his rookie year went. We thought it'd be Jackson and not Carson Schmidt, but obviously that's been flip flop. So, getting this opportunity is really a last ditch effort, but Flores showed immediately they believed in him. They gave him a 3-year contract, so he's not going to be on his toes to perform, immediately. Like, he has time to build himself up. And how ironic, the first race he's there, they go to victory lane, and Jackson's only the second driver in ASCA history to win in their first start with a new team, joining Grant Von Duvedel, who also conveniently was the only other driver to score their first win in the Ajax 200. But I think a huge key here for Ross Jackson that wasn't really talked about much, and I think it should be talked about more, is how he and Todd Kidd, um, the week before Speedweeks, they talked things out. They talked out, what happened in their incident, and obviously everything that happened at the end of last season, and they completely squashed their beef. And I think that having that not hang over Jackson's head, that, oh, I need to get revenge on, the defending Cup Series champion, and just kind of I can focus on doing my own thing, focus on building up Flores, focus on, turning this next opportunity into, the one that rises me into superstardom, making the best of a bad situation. I think that that's been critical for Ross, and now we can focus forward completely on this season, and maybe acting out that Flores Motorsports revenge tour. And want to give a call to Sheldon Price as well. I say we talk about him because he was fired like the day after the season finale. Like, you finish tied for the championship as a crew chief and you get fired. How does that happen? But that's just the cutthroat nature of Orkedi Bros Racing, especially working with Diego Orkedi. That's easily the hardest crew chiefing job in the ASCA. You can ask his 10 other crew chiefs that have come before Sheldon Price. And Price, I think, delivered the most calm, cool, collected Diego we've ever seen. Diego's true final form. He obviously started to unravel towards the end of the season once the pressure was on him. But, especially in 2024, we really didn't see the same Diego that we had been seeing in, years past. Like, he had calmed down tremendously, and this was, a process that took years, and no other crew chief has been able to do that other than Sheldon Price. So for him to be let go was extremely harsh by OBR. I said they were making a mistake when it happened, and I certainly do believe that, considering now you look at the feud at that team that we're going to talk about in a second. It's like, if Sheldon Price was there, would we be seeing that right now? I don't I don't think the answer is yes. It's nothing against Sam Rosberg, but this is a rookie crew chief, only what, 31 years old, something like that, thrown to the wolves like this, and now he's got to learn how to resolve conflicts. Sean wouldn't never beast with anyone down the Craftsman series. It's a whole different beast dealing with an alpha dog, um, A1 type one personality like Diego that never takes no for an answer. It's apples and oranges basically. So Sheldon Price, you bring him into Flores, you have a championship winning mentality. You bring Ross Jackson in with a point to prove, and we're already seeing that marriage is working brilliantly. So hats off to Flores. They executed a total rebuild in a year. And I honestly think, you could say this is a fluke. At this point, you really don't know. But I would not say that it is because this is the team that was fastest in testing. They were the fastest team in testing. And I get it. A lot of teams weren't showing their hands in testing. Understandable. Certainly, maybe Ronnie Woods Motorsports and Orkedi Bros Racing were sandbagging, but I understand. But I I just think that looking at this group right now, it's crazy how far they've come in just an off season. You normally can't execute this in the ASCA. Execute a total rebuild from back marker to race winners in a year. So big shout out to team owner Manny Flores, all the management there. They've done a tremendous job, completely flipping that organization's outlook for 2026 and beyond. Because I think that they're finally on the road. They were building something with Sam Bear, and then obviously they let him go. But now I think they're back on that path, and I think they have a driver with even more potential than Sam Bear in the fold, and Ross Jackson at the age of 25, former Craftsman Series champion. I think this could be a dangerous team in the coming years. So let's talk about that Orkedi Bros Racing drama. 10 cents for the team, based on Carson Smith's final lap decision. And Jimmy Hood did a great video posted to the ASCA social media accounts. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check that out. Basically breaking down the analytics of Carson Smith's decision. If he stayed with his teammates or if he pushed Bryn Renner. And you look at the analytics, you look at the data. I know people are sick of it after all we heard was this week. Analytics, data, analytics, all this data science. I know people are sick of it. But when you look at the data, you look at the probabilities, Carson Smith had a 10% chance of winning if he went with Diego Orkedi and Graham Doherty on the last lap. Now, that being said, Doherty would have had a much better chance of winning, and Orkedi Racing in general would have had a much better chance of winning if, he goes with them. But him going with Bryn Renner, Smith that is, jumped Smith's probability of winning up to 30%, because that move basically put him from sixth to fourth. And, Jackson and Bennett, they were getting feisty there on the final lap. So if those two tangled, that could have been, the door would have opened wide for Renard and Schmidt and all those guys to race it out to the finish. So Schmidt was putting himself in the best position to succeed. And I see nothing wrong with what he did. Obviously, Diego does, because let's be honest, Diego, for once, was a selfless team player, which is extremely rare out of him. Obviously, with Nick Orkedi in the booth now, not on the racetrack, Diego has to rely on Graham Doherty really to kind of fill that void for him. And for Carson Smith, he was running towards the back all day, but it come to where all three of those guys link up. Schmidt let both of Graham and Diego in line because they were trying to make something happen on the bottom on the restart, and everyone jumped straight to the top of the racetrack. So it was just a rush, a mad rush to get to the top and follow in line behind Greg Healy. And speaking of Healy, want to give a brief shout out to him and Braden Bennett. Healy especially, though, running out of fuel in the final lap, that's a really tough deal. Heartbreaking defeat. He goes from leading to 20th, and that's brutal in terms of the point standings because, we've seen when he gets behind like this, especially heading to a road course next up, he's going to have a hard time recovering. So, heartbreaking defeat for Healy and a tough loss as well for Braden Bennett. Same position he was in the shootout and fell short. So, want to give a brief shout out to those guys on their heartbreaking defeats before I forgot. But looking at Carson Schmidt and what he did, I just don't see what he did wrong. And, I somewhat get why Diego's mad because he sacrificed basically his entire race to help Graham Darty. He was pushing Darty pretty much all day. You know, those two were inseparable the entire race, and up until the bitter end, when Schmidt made the move, and then Diego knew the writing was on the wall that their bid to try to win the race wasn't going to work, and obviously all that happened, and it's a tough situation. But Carson Schmidt has a race team. He's got a crew chief. He has sponsors. He needs to please. He can't just be content to ride around and finish what, fourth. If he has a shot to win, he needs to take it. And we saw he finished the highest of his teammates based on making that move, and nearly did have a shot to win. I think at the finish line was maybe about 200 yards further down. I think that Renard and Schmidt catch Jackson and potentially pass him. And Schmidt was right there, was trying to make a move. I think he set up a move on Renard a little too late off of turn four. It was a close finish between those two for second, but yeah. So Schmidt's obviously trying to do his own thing. He's trying to run his own race. He's trying to win the Ajax 200, one of the biggest prizes in the sport. Diego already has an Ajax 200. So I know that according to updates, Diego has not spoken to Schmidt since Saturday, which is asinine to me. But we know Diego gets like this, and that's why he's incredibly tough to work with. But obviously, you kind of have to. He's a 29-time winner, 4-time champion. The talent's undeniable with Diego, but he can be kind of a prick at times, and I think he's 100% in the wrong here. I think that he's really not seeing it from Schmidt's perspective, but you can't expect anything more out of Diego. Um, this is obviously just who he is, especially with Selden Price there. I think we're going to see a lot more vintage Diego than we have any other year in the past. So we talked about analytics briefly and breaking down Carson Schmidt's decision. Now we're going to talk about analytics and the data as a whole. And were the teams leaning too much into it? And, should this be brought back for the race here later in the season? I think it's tough, because we look at where technology is. We're midway through the 2020s now, and things just continue to get more and more technologically advanced. And we all know that races at Ajax Super Speedway are a crapshoot. So if your teams, you're going to want to find any sort of edge, any sort of advantage that you can to get the upper hand on everyone else. And we all know a lot of stuff generally gets torn up in these races, in these race weekends. And we saw that an analytics based Ajax 200 only saw 5 cars DNF. There was only 1 yellow, which I think that's got to be like a tie for the record low for the Ajax 200, even with that play package that everyone hated from 2020 to 2021, trying to make things safer for the drivers. Everyone hated that package. And we saw 5 cars finish in 2020. And then 2021, we saw 2 cautions. But the second one was obviously at the end of the race, and it was St. Park's horrific accident. And, we just, he was injured after that. Mind you, he ended up racing the next week, but I think he broke his wrist or something brutal. So, basically that just kind of shows that, nothing is guaranteed. And as much as you want to make play racing safe, it's still a crapshoot at the end of the day. And I think that a lot of the older guys with these analytics are saying, this racing is still a crapshoot. No matter how much you want to look at the probability of this move or this block or anything like that, at the end of the day, it's still a crapshoot. You can't outfox a crapshoot. It is what it is. And I think that On one hand, you look at the lack of cautions, you look at the more, I would say, it's tough to say, especially for the cup race, because the side draft was obviously neutered, and teams also did want to come up with a solution to that because we saw in the Craftsman race how much easier it was for drivers individually to make moves. And the cup race, you absolutely needed help. Um, you know, no matter what kind of maneuver you were trying to make, you needed help. You could not generate runs on your own and definitely not runs enough to make a bid for the lead or, a pass for the lead. You needed help. And, you know, when it comes to timing that, teams obviously want to know exactly when to go because as you go at the wrong time, you're going to the back. So it makes sense why teams would want something like this, to do anything they can to increase their odds of winning one of the sport's biggest races. But you also kind of saw the cons of it, especially you look at Greg Healy's duel accident, where I guess the analytics told him to come down and block Norm Lester. He wasn't clear. You look at Tony Del Valle's accident with Doug Bowden in the Craftsman race. Analytics told Del Valle to come up and block. He wasn't clear. So the analytics, even though they might seem 100% concrete in practice, they're not. And the older guys absolutely hated this. Randall Woods, Norm Lester, they're like, throw this out the window. But, the young guys, like Del Valle and some of these other guys, Thorson, I know he referenced it after the race, they're all in. They're all in, just trying to follow these and they take it for the gospel. I just kind of think it's going to be interesting to see how that develops because I think it's going to be a staple of plate racing going forward. I think that we saw enough good out of it to, I think that it can be helpful, but I think that teams also need to recognize that it has its place and it's not the end all be all. And it can't analytics obviously cannot account for split second decisions. So yeah, that's it for finally. That's the end of analytics. At least for plate racing. Obviously, it's going to be used this week at the streets Computerville, and moving forward the rest of the year. But it it will be a big deal. It's just going to be more so behind the scenes. It was obviously spotlighted a bunch this week, but probably it's going to be more so behind the scenes stuff, and you may see little bits and pieces of it on the broadcast, but probably not much. So let's get into Nick Painter's dramatic Craftsman victory. And I'll tell you what, I don't think I've seen a last lap Ajax Super Speedway driven any better than what Nick Painter did. I don't think I've seen Dan Rogers. I don't think I've seen Doug Bowden. I don't think I've seen Todd Kidd, um, Ronnie Woods. I don't think I've seen any driver in ASCA or Jared Ayers. I don't think I've seen any driver put together a more perfect last lap than Nick Painter. That was outstanding. We saw Brady Bennett, one of the young rising stars, basically try to pull off what Painter did with Ross Jackson. He couldn't do it. And I will say for Painter, it obviously certainly helped that he had the side draft, but he waited until the exact perfect moment. He was patient, but he knew exactly when it was time to go, flip the switch. And, he tried to go high. Edwards blocked it. He tried to go low. He did eventually get under Edwards. And then right at the end, he goes for the side draft at the perfect time. If he side drafts any later, he loses that race. If he side drafts any earlier, who knows? Edwards maybe, was able to come back with a side draft of his own. It's just at the perfect time he pulled off everything. And bravo to Painter. Huge win for he and Kirk Autosport. Huge win for himself personally. He lost his dog, his longtime best friend. The week prior to the season opener. Obviously, that was an incredibly emotional moment for him and Victory Lane. Going over that, that was a tough deal, tough situation. And for him to come out and put on basically the drive of his life. One of the best drives in ASCA history to win that race is astonishing. It really is. It was astonishing. So the Craftsman series has been insane as of late. If you're not watching the Craftsman series, I don't know what you're doing. This is the future of the ASC on display. We know Tony Doval II will for sure be in the number 18 next season. Gunnar Thorson will most likely be in the Cup Series next year. Kane Dunham, I get he hasn't really done anything. You know, a lot of people are talking about him like he's some superstar. And I said it on Twitter after the race. We do need to pump the brakes a bit on Kane Dunham because this is a guy that in his 3 starts, he has not even made it to halfway in any of his 3 starts. He qualifies well, at least for races where the Ford Development Program is actually trying to qualify well. Um, when they have the equipment to qualify well, he qualifies well. He's great at that, great on 1 lap pace, but he is way too aggressive, way too reckless. And I get that the accident in the season opener was not his fault at all. It was just Calvin Terriu being way too aggressive, entering the pits. Just a really dumb move on his part, and he drove an extremely poor race. Really bad first impression for Snoots in general. I know there was a lot of hype and optimism surrounding them, and we're not off to a great start with them, to say the least. So, yeah, but for Dunham, I just think we'll see. I think we're going to learn a lot more about him within these next few weeks. Is his driving style truly sustainable? Can he rein it in a bit? When does he needs to find that balance that Diego eventually did? And I think that he can. He has the potential to be special. He's got to clean a lot of things up, and that's why he's in the Craftsman series. So, yeah. But yeah, he's obviously one of the most exciting drivers to watch across the ASCA right now. And of course, we got the reigning champion, Sean Wooden, who's now got an uphill battle to climb. But, that's back to back photo finishes in the Craftsman series, dating back to the season finale last season. And yeah, so Craftsman series is incredible right now. It's going to be incredible this season in general. And yeah, just fantastic stuff overall. And I definitely cannot wait for the Craftsman race this week at the streets of Computerville. Going to be the first real litmus test for these 7 rookies to see who's for real and who's not, basically. But let's talk silly season for a brief moment. Ryan Dixon and CJ Barrymore Racing, after over a decade together. This is their 11th season together, and they mutually agreed to part ways after the 2026 campaign. And this is one that it's overdue, long overdue actually, but it still feels extremely weird because Dixon has been such a staple in that 6 car, and I get that his career hasn't gone and we anticipated it going. It started out so fast. A lot of people thought he'd be better than Todd Kidd. Those two came up together in the same rookie class, and Dixon, he was the first to win. I think he won like 3 races before Todd Kidd even won his first, if I recall correctly. But he just kind of plateaued as borderline championship contender and has only gone downhill ever since. I believe his best points finish of the decade is 6th. That was in 2020. He's only won 1 race in the last 5 years, the 2022 Ajax 200, where he came from last to first. Got to shout him out for that one for sure. But it's just a tough situation, and this was, like I said, it was a long overdue. Dixon is far from the same driver that he was, obviously at the start of his career, but even a half decade ago, he's not that guy anymore. He's not a championship contender, and he did finish ahead of Chris Barrymore last season. They finished level on points, but Dixon had more top 10s, so he got the tiebreaker. So he finished 14th in points last year, which is an improvement but that's not a good improvement. You'd expect the CJ Barrymore Racing car to be finishing top 10 in points, up there with Cameron Atwood and whatnot. So it was long overdue. And for CJ Barrymore Racing, we'll start with them. I think that this signals to me full rebuild. This is a rebuilding project. You, Chris Barrymore forced his way up out of there, and I think that it was time for the team to move on from him, anyways. So he forced his way out. I think that was a good move for both parties. You bring in Ian Adonde. Now Dixon, the team mutually agreed to part ways, but I think the team was ready to let him go. They weren't going to resign him. And Dixon, I think that he needs a change of scenery to revive his career. So he walked out the door. Now I think you need to bring in another young driver. And the question is who? You got a couple rookies at the Ford development program. Do you bring in Sean Wooden? Do you try to poach someone from another team? Do you try to poach a Gunnar Thorson? You're obviously not going to poach Silval, but who do you try to bring in? Do you poach a Will Moon? That remains to be seen. Surely it couldn't be Dunham or Reynard unless they just completely go off the rest of the season. I don't see that one happening. So, but I do think that it needs to be a young talent to complement Ian Adonde and kind of go from there. And long term, what does this mean for Cameron Atwood, who has an expiring contract after 2027 and has also dropped hints that, hey, if things don't go well this season, I'm out. So it's a tough situation, but I think that a rebuild is time. A rebuild is time for CJ Barrymore Racing. It's ironic because they had this young core. I remember about a decade ago where they had this young core of Dixon, Barrymore, and Caleb Henderson Jr. And we thought that these guys were going to be the next dynasty of the ASCA. These young dudes, all former Craftsman champions, so exciting to watch. And the ironic part is none of them won a championship for the team. The only championship the team has won in the modern era was from Cameron Atwood, who they brought in after Henderson Jr. retired. So it's just kind of crazy to think about how things end up working out. And here we are a decade later. Barrymore's gone. Dixon is going to be gone after this season. And Henderson Jr. obviously retired, a half decade ago. So that's just the ASCA for you, man. That's the ASCA for you. And one of the longest tenured drivers is out the door. But what's next for Ryan Dixon? Should he retire? He's only 31 years old. He'll be 32 next year. I think retirement's on the table. He could go back down the Craftsman series. He could potentially get another cup ride. I don't think it's going to be for a top team. I can't see another top team taking a chance on him. I just think that's 5 years well past time. But I could see him taking a seat at like a Tico Bowden Motorsports. One of these smaller kind of backmarker organizations looking for a veteran stabilizing presence. I think Tico Bowden Motorsports would be the perfect one because we've seen them kind of go for that type before. Jack Fronwell, Ryan Braun. Those are like the two most notable options. Bring in that veteran guy, early to mid 30s. He's going to stick around for a couple years. At least what you're going to get. It's not going to be anything special, but he's not going to tear up the car most weeks. So I'm eyeing Dixon at TBM, but we'll see. Who knows? He could go back down to Craftsman. He could retire for all we know. So it's going to be interesting to kind of follow that story. All right, and then one final topic to discuss this week. Streets Computerville, ASCA's backyard, coming up this weekend. The Craftsman and the Cup Series. I'm excited. I am excited for this. It's going to be an interesting one. We have no idea what to expect, to be honest with you. I mean, we can say that we expect Shane Park and Colin Ward to be up there, but did Ronnie Woods Motorsports nail the new regulations? I don't know. Did Orkedi Bros Racing nailed the new regulations. This is going to be the first true test for these regs and the turbo hybrid engines, unrestricted for that matter, and 900 horsepower under the hood. Man, there's a lot of unknowns. So we'll start by previewing the Craftsman Series race because I think that's much more predictable. We've got Jack Alaus, Ryan Dixon, Jared Ayers, and Marcus Edwards, Cup drivers in the field. Alaus, Dixon, Ayers, they're all going to be up at the front. I think that's pretty straightforward, guaranteed. But also got to remember the defending race winner is Tony Del Valle II. He's back in this race. This was the site that he scored his shock first career win at a year ago. I've got my eyes on him, obviously, as a favorite, trying to bounce back after his DNF last week. And then for these rookies, are these guys actually good at road racing? Are they not? Who knows what to expect out of these young guys? I think Sean Wooden, also the defending champion, finished last week ago. He's definitely going to bounce back. We obviously know he's a road ringer. He's won here multiple times in the Cup Series. But if I had to pick a winner for this race, I think Ryan Dixon, right after he gets that news that he's leaving CJ Barrymore Racing, I think that this is something that he's been needing to get off his chest for a while. But I think that, now that he knows he's going to be getting a fresh start next year, he's got something to prove. He's got to audition for a new ride. So I think he's going to come out motivated. He's obviously won here before, I believe, multiple times. He's going to win this race. So then on the Cup side, like I said, there's so many unknowns about this weekend and the new regulations and the turbo hybrid engines and how these guys are going to come out and perform. But until further notice, you're right. I cannot pick against Shane Park and Colin Ward. I think that those two right now are head and shoulders above everyone as the two best road ringers in the sport. Now, I will say, keep an eye if you want a dark horse pick. My two dark horses would be Lucas Sambert and Jack Ayers, because we saw Sambert win pole for this race a year ago. He led the opening 21 laps. Keep an eye on him. Keep an eye on Jack Alaus as well. I think I said Ayers. Jack Ayers. No, Jack Alaus. Jared Ayers could also be a factor. He's won this race in the past, but I doubt it. He's another guy that probably on his way out of his current team as it stands. But I think if I had to pick a road ringer to win right now, Shane Park, can't go wrong picking him on a road course. Coming off a mad race a week ago, he led laps, but obviously finished outside the top 10. Disappointing outing for him and for Ronnie Rich Motorsports as a whole, considering they put on a dominant Speedweeks just to lose in the race that matters most. So they're going to come back for vengeance. They're out for blood. I think that they're going to win this week with Shane Park. But that's it for a second edition of Around the Association. Man, I've been talking a lot. This is Charles Fallon. Thank you for tuning in. If you've listened this long, greatly appreciate it. Shout out Circle Me Diecast. Shout out Plan B Sales. Shout out the ASCA merch shop. And we will see you after next week to recap the right turns.